Black families are homeschooling at levels higher than ever before. Recently, we interviewed homeschooling parents, grads, and family members about homeschooling with the help of Remake Learning's Shifting Powers Research Project. Here's what they said.
So I'm Pricilla Robertson. I'm 57 and I'm a mother of 10 kids. And so we homeschooled 9 of them. Well, I'm sorry, we lost 2. So we homeschooled 7 of the 10. Who makes up my homeschooling family? So of course it's me, it's my husband, and our children. They make it up. So we had 2 daughters and 3 of our sons, 5 of our sons who went through homeschool. There was a number of reasons. One of them was we had a very proactive church in Austin, Texas, and the pastor was all about family and all about families doing as much as they could for their kids, like you take the lead. There were a lot of problems in the school district in Austin, Texas, and so we were kind of experiencing a little bit of that. And talking to him one day, we realized that they had a daycare center. My husband was working at the daycare center. And so he was like looking at the curriculum. It was just like a God thing. Like, okay, you're taking this step, coming to this proactive church. It was, I think their theme was education. It was salvation, education, and I forget the third one. But it had a lot to do with spiritual development. And so, realizing that, we decided that conversation would help kind of pushed us. And then we started having, with one of our sons, the teachers complaining about his behavior. And we didn't quite trust what they were saying. Of course, growing up in Texas, in the South, with the racism, experiencing all of that, we already didn't trust the school system. So it wasn't much of a push to be a part of a church that was saying, hey, take control, take the lead in your kids' education, in your education. And so that's why we decided to do it. The house, I've had an opportunity to talk to other homeschool families, and I think ours is different because it's constant laying things in place. So what I mean by that is, one Sunday a lady said to me, she said, God said, bless your kids with a keyboard. None of our kids had shown an interest in music. I said, okay. So she bought the keyboard for the kids for Christmas. We put it there. We didn't know what was going to happen. Our daughter got on it first. Then the boys would plink around. How many years later, they're musicians. They know technology. They're connected. Their creativity was birthed through that. So our homeschool family, I think we're different in that we let their interests determine how we lay out their education. So that might be one of the things that makes a difference. And then whether they use it or not, we put it in front of them. For example, I grew up with the whole math phobia fear thing. I didn't want my kids to be afraid of math. So one of the things we did was we put them in chess, because it was important to me that they were able to not be afraid of numbers and letters together. Because when you get into algebra, when you get into the upper maths, you're starting to see letters and numbers together. I didn't want them to be afraid of that. I also was walking down the hall at my job. I work at a community college, and one of the professors was retiring. He had all these calculus and these big math books calculus, And so I was like, I don't want them to be afraid of those. So I grabbed those books, never opened them in front of them, just laid them around the house. So introducing things, and the kids said to me later, they're college students now, they said to me, well, my 2 of them were college students, couple of them have graduated. But they said to me, "That's what you were doing?" I said, "Yeah, I didn't want you guys to be afraid of trigonometry, calculus, physics, those kinds of things. So I just put the books on the bookshelf." They said, "Yeah, we saw those books." And they're taking calculus and trigonometry and physics and chemistry, So I think that's how we're different too. We don't try to force those things on them. I just, I think it was just, I just laid it around there for them to see. If they picked it up, they picked it up. I have a doctorate in education that I just finished in 2019. Ever since I was 11 years old, I would tell people, my children are going to be my bachelor's, my master's, and my PhD. Well, I had 10 kids. But, I always wanted a big family, but I always wanted my education. My husband has a master's in theology, and I went to community college first. I didn't feel strong enough, or even believed in myself enough to do a regular college, a regular 4-year college. I always wanted to have my education, but I think what it changed me was the confidence, growing and building the confidence as a woman, as an African American woman, to teach your kids. Because you grow up in a society that everybody around you who's teaching your kids don't look like you. So confidence, faith in God definitely grew, because we had to pray. How do you do this? When we started, back in the 1990s, trying to teach these kids, there weren't many families we knew of. Matter of fact, we didn't know any. No one in our church was doing homeschooling. We watched videos to learn about it. When my husband was in his undergraduate at Abilene Christian University, we combed the library. Where are these materials at? Because we didn't have the money to buy it. Man, when I walked into that library at Abilene Christian University and I saw the education section, and there were all of these curriculums with dust on them, I thought, I found a gold mine. And I was checking that stuff out and taking it home, But yeah, that's it. That's it. It depended on the day, it depended on the child. Along the way, as we homeschooled, my husband became ill. Mm-hmm. So it depended on how he felt, because he was the primary teacher, I was the secondary teacher. When it came time to do, in Pennsylvania, you have to do an affidavit. That's really simple to do, but you have to do one that says, basically, what are you going to be teaching? And so I was the homeschool supervisor. So we set it up that way. And the classes that I had, because I had to work, I would record the reading lessons. So if I was teaching them their ABCs, I would record my voice and they would listen back to that. If I was responsible for their reading lesson and we were reading a book, I would read that book onto audio. And then sometimes if I'm down in the kitchen cooking or something, just play the tape. They were cassette tapes back then. And then they switched to DVDs, So, the other thing you said, how did homeschool change you? It made me technology savvy. It depended on the kids. We became kind of a 24/7, 7 days a week homeschool. So because our life was so busy with my husband being a minister in church, and those kinds of things, we intermingled it into everything that we did. And that is what's so sweet about homeschool too, is because it doesn't have to be separate from your life. It's part of your life. And that's how some of the best learning happens. In the grocery store, you're teaching them math. You're teaching them decision making. You're teaching them how to read labels on different things. You're teaching them nutrition. You're teaching them you're teaching them how to package and pack things. And so it's just all kinds of, when we started doing it that way, they started really buying into it. Because if you don't get buy-in, they don't learn. So they started buying into it, you know. And then another thing is how our homeschool day was situated. It was whatever they were interested in. So then instruments started coming into the house. You know, I had a son who, my youngest, would rip sheets of paper. And I'm like, what is all this ripped sheets of paper? Ripped sheets of paper turned into, he got so excited about transformers. He would take those sheets of paper and make little transformers. So then we started going, okay, sheets of paper. And then my husband found something called bendaroos. And so then he started bending these, they're like little pieces of wax. And he would bend them into shapes. So ripped paper turned into bendaroos, into shapes, into Legos, into, you know, now, today, he's studying creative writing. So all of the creating that he was doing, it melded or molded into who he's becoming as a 19-year-old young man today. You know, studying writing, studying technology.
It's beautiful.
Let the kids determine, let them determine, if I had to add, let them determine what they want to do that day. You'll be surprised. What excites them, they will want to learn. And I had my homeschool evaluator say, she never taught her kids how to read. And that was a struggle. Getting them to read is a struggle. But if they're interested in what they're doing, they'll want to learn to read because they can't read to do what they want to do.
You got it.
So yes, we had reading and we read to them and we had reading lessons, but it was mostly centered around they became very strong in their reading when they were interested in what they were doing. So I'm not saying don't teach them reading. She was like, oh, don't do that. But I felt like they need to know this. So there are some things as a parent that you're going to put in place that they're just going to have to do. Life is not free. You're going to have to do some things. But let's mix that with some things you do want to do. So what are you interested in? Oh, let's read about that. It's kind of hard. It's kind of the light bulb moment. You're not looking for it. You're so busy trying to make sure that they're learning, that your day-to-day is happening. I don't know when it actually clicked for me. I remember families starting to come to me or call me and say, hey, I have this friend who's got this thing going on at their school. I have this kid who is doing cyber school. Because remember the days when cyber school came along, 2003, 4, when people started doing cyber school. I have my son who's doing cyber school, and it's going to take him a year to graduate, and he'll be 18 in a month. He's talking about dropping. And I would say, oh, well, we found this online school. He can graduate in a week. And the lady was like, what? I was like, yeah, you know. And so when I think that started happening on my job, when people would know we were homeschooling and a homeschool family would walk in, I became the go-to. Well, let's ask Pricilla. She homeschools all her kids, and you know, they're students at our institution now, and you know, they're doing well in school. And so I think it happened over time. And when I heard about this project, and my daughter's teacher, her history professor was like, hey, we're doing this project for African American families who homeschool. And she was like, yeah, you know, let me talk to my mom. I wanted to do my dissertation on homeschooling, but I told you guys in the meeting, I was so close to it and so passionate about it that I was like, okay, I can't do this on my own. So I was happy to join this. But that's the confidence It happened over time. But trust God, trust what He's showing you, trust your instincts, trust your kids. You know, they're people too. They're telling you, you see their eyes light up. You see them ripping paper. I mean, you see what they're interested in. One person told me, she said, whatever you see your children doing without you telling them to do it, that's probably the thing that God has called them to. It's probably their vocation. So pay attention to your kids. When they know you're not looking, just pay attention. And you'll learn so much. And that'll build your confidence. And the two of you will get excited together.
Check them out.
We started out taking our son out. The first one who homeschooled. We took him out. But everyone else went straight through homeschool. Like I said, before we started, I had the one daughter who wanted to, at 16, 17, wanted to go to public school because she thought she was missing something. And I think that's one of the things that happens too. People ask me all the time, well, what about socialization? And one of my responses as a young homeschool parent was, you mean the socialization where they get picked on? The socialization where there's peer pressure? The socialization where the teachers are messing with them? What kind of socialization do you mean? And I had to grow to the point that I could stop being angry about that question because they were curious. They want to know, well, what about your kids meeting other kids? Well, gee, I had so many. But we involved them in the things that they wanted to do. If it was baseball, we put them in a music school. The Afro-American Music Institute in Pittsburgh was very instrumental in their development. They were in boys choir. They traveled with the choir. They became very close with the director and executive director, the family that owned it, our churches, church events, finding friends, connecting with friends. And so you can build in the kind of healthy socialization that you want for them. But don't ever feel hampered when somebody says, oh, what about socialization? Because sometimes they were picking at me. Sometimes they weren't. But having a healthy response to it, because I don't think my first response was healthy. They could see I was angry. Or I felt like they were challenging my decision. But it's your decision. They're your children. God gave them to you. And so you're doing the very best you can. Don't ever feel like you're not doing the best you can. If you don't know, own it. Find out. Ask someone. Use this video, however you guys use this project. I'd love to remain a part of it, because I think it's an opportunity to really help people get that confidence and that level of, I can do this. I don't have to keep sending my kid if it's a bad environment, because not all public school environments are bad. It's just for us, they seem like they're that way all the time. But they are producing some of the world's most knowledgeable young people. But I think they also need to respect the fact that school are homeschoolers. Because our kids are getting stronger, being productive, they're moving into society, and they're now becoming that group of also innovators. That we're basically holding. I did an executive research study for my doctorate. We had to kind of talk about a subject, and quickly I chose homeschooling because I was thinking about doing it as my dissertation. And some of the things that they talked about was basically homeschoolers. They just clean the house. Their parents are holding them hostage so they can, those kinds of things. Kids are not really learning. The parents are not educated enough to teach their kids. They should be putting them in public school. And so those are the kinds of myths that I would like to dispel, because Neither my husband nor I had a bachelor's degree. We had a high school diploma when we started educating our kids. We became more educated over time, but our concepts didn't change. It was still reading, writing, and arithmetic. Reading, and as their age changed, then reading became more, math became more. It grew with them because we wanted their strengths to be enhanced and their weaknesses to be strengthened. And it's fundamentals. If you can do reading, writing, and math on every age level for your child and build in what they're interested in, they are going to be excellent adults. It's going to happen because they're interested in their everyday life and they love what they're doing. And they're going to want to be part of those people who want to do something for society. My son, who's 24, is in architecture and sustainability now. He's in school for that. And he wants to make people's living environment less stressful. My daughter is studying physics and she wants to study light optics. And she wants to be able to help people when they see things that light isn't affecting them in negative ways. Our son, who's in film and digital media, wants to make films that uplift the family, that strengthen families, that help men and women build. You talked about confidence, not feeling less than because you're African American. My son, who's in music, he writes lyrics that talk to you about being a healthy person, not getting into bad relationships, not feeling bad about yourself. So we're talking about building people in a different environment through homeschooling, that the world around them and their sphere of influence is better. We use everything we can get our hands on, and things that we would innovate ourselves. One of our kids, one of my sons, was having trouble focusing when he read, so I made this little reader that would focus only on what words he was reading. So I just took some cardboard and I took some clear plastic and I cut a little hole. I glued it together, slid the plastic in. I think I used tape actually. It was cardboard. I cut a hole big enough for a couple of words, and I taped it together with, so that he could see, and we would move through the pages, through each sentence, so that he could focus on the word. So that tool, you create your tools. I love the movie, Something the Lord Made, because it's a movie about a man who was a contractor. His father trained him to be a contractor, but he became one of the renowned people who worked at Johns Hopkins Hospital there was a disease where kids couldn't breathe and their heart, the heart valve would block off and they were called blue babies. He was the African American man who was integral into the change for that. And so he made his tools. If you need to make something to help your child learn, make it. I made that little reader thing. I recorded my voice. Kids love you. They want to hear your voice. If you need to go to work or you need to record it. I would, something else that I would do is I would write little notes on sticky notes and stick them up, a scripture or an encouraging word or something like that. So make your tools if you need to make your tools. Find your tools, libraries, garage sales, thrift stores, college libraries, online, internet. Whatever, and that's the thing about being a parent. When you love your kid, you're gonna do whatever within the law, let me put that in there, that you need to do for them to learn. God bless them. There was a family that believed in us. and they would give us money for curriculum. And I mean, I'm thinking 3-4 kids, and they would give us, whenever our kids needed to change curriculum, they would donate money to us, to buy. And curriculum is, you're buying, I'm talking, you're buying Alpha Omega and all these other because we're a Christian family, Christian-based kinds of, whatever tool you need. If you need to create it, create it. Ask questions. Ask other people. Don't be afraid. It's okay if you don't know. Gee, I try not to get into that because that could be political. But I definitely believe in homeschooling. Even if you want to do it part-time. I mean, they send so much homework home. You're doing it anyway. I want to go back real bit. Tools. When we would buy books online, we would use places like A-Books, the cheap, you just look for cheap bookstores. But we would also get the teacher's edition and use the teacher's edition to teach our kids because it has everything worked out. Why are we giving them the book that doesn't have the answers when we want them to get the answers? So I started buying my kids teacher's editions of books to help them. I used my college books to help integrate them into college materials. So that, again, those things wouldn't be foreign to them. But go back to your question.
It's okay. It's current thoughts on public schooling versus
homeschool. Okay, so I think that I'm an educator. I work in higher education. I work with students all the time who are coming from various different life backgrounds, who have been in public school. And I think that the one thing that homeschool does is it teaches kids learn how they learn in homeschool. In public school, you're taught to learn the way that they prescribe you should learn. And to me, that's the difference. Without getting into all of the other stuff, I'll leave that other stuff to the people who want to be political and who want to address those things. But when it comes down to the child, they need to know how they learn so that when school gets difficult, they know what they need, what tool they need to go to. My kids know I don't know X. My daughter called her dad last night. She's in Calc 2. And she's like, Dad, I see holes. And he said, okay. He went online. He went to, I think it was Excel Math. And he said, okay, hon, you don't have, that's a hole. Well, go to this. So she's now subscribing to Excel Math and she's going back through her fundamentals for those calc pieces to pull those things in, because she took calc at the university before she switched to this university. She took Calc 1, but they teach it different. That's the other thing. Students learn different, teachers teach different. And homeschoolers know, I learn different. I know how I learn. So when I meet someone who's teaching me, I know what my weaknesses are. And I think that's the difference with public school and homeschool is they don't get an opportunity to learn what they don't know or do know about themselves. I took a break when I needed to take a break, which wasn't often, but I think because we made it part of our everyday life and learning was always happening, it's difficult to check out of life. So when you make homeschool part of your everyday, you're doing it anyway. They're asking you questions anyway. And my kids would get sick of me saying, oh, that's a good paper. Because they would say, Mom, X, Y, Z. Oh yeah, so look that up and write a paper on it. They got so sick of me saying that. But it taught them how to teach themselves. And we learned together, because when they would go search out their question, I would give them my 2 cents, and then they would have somebody else's 2 cents. So then it teaches them how to balance information, how to evaluate information. But when I got tired, I remembered that it was a calling. They were in public school. I remembered what my older kids had dealt with. And I was committed to, if they can do it, we can do it. And we can do it in a loving way because we love them. It's not a job for us. Sometimes I think you run across teachers who they're trying to get through their every day, but they have to teach these kids. And so their commitment wanes. So don't beat up on yourself. Yeah, you're gonna have those days when it gets hard. Maybe that's the day that you guys go to the park and have a picnic school day. Maybe that's a day, because like I said, we didn't have a lot of money to do this. So we had to find free ways to do things. You pick a movie and it's half off day or something. Find another way on those difficult days. Just know that if you give up, you're not losing a student, you're losing a child. So it's not an option. So just rearrange, do something different. Ask them, say, hey, mommy's not feeling like it or daddy's not feeling like it today. What do you want to do? Nothing's not an option. What do you want to do? So kind of, it happens. Yeah, it happens. But I think every parent remembers why they started doing it, whether it was something that made you angry or whether it was, I'm doing this because there's something that I want to instill in them that they can't instill in them the way I can. And also, if you feel like you need to put them in public school, don't beat up on yourself about that either. Do your due diligence, find the best school you can find, see if they have scholarships if it's that kind of school, talk to the principal, meet the teacher, evaluate the decision. And if it works out, then you put them there. These are options for education. They really are.
Got more questions about homeschooling? Want to hear more from Black homeschoolers? Visit blackhomeschoolquestions.com.